From deep in the Burbank Media District, it's time for another edition of myBurbank Talks. This podcast is presented by the staff of myBurbank. Now, let's see what's on today's agenda as we join our program.
Hey, everybody. Craig Sherwood here, along with, of course, the infamous Ross Benson.
Oh, I guess I should get my glasses and comb my hair.
Absolutely. Well, here we are for another week in the week that was and the week that will be. And it's kind of an abbreviated version because being a holiday week and a lot of people are out of town. A lot of activities are kind of going slowly, but we got a few things for you for the week. We're going to start off with last week here, and we have last week's Tuesday. They had a council meeting.
They did?
Yes, they did, and thank goodness you watched it. We're going to start off. They had an update from Frank Miller about the rough estimate of the completion of the new terminal. What did you hear about that, Ross?
Well, he gave a report. Our three police commissioners were in attendance: Emily Gabaletti, Bud Overham, and Jess Telemontes. They were introduced, and Frank Miller, who is a director at the airport, kind of gave a update where they are financially. You know, this is a big multi-million-dollar project, and
many years,
and they've taken in public input, they're taking in other input. Now they're putting all that stuff together. They have the design, and there's a lot going on too, like certifications for energy and lead and all that. So, but the bottom line is, after about a 20-minute report from Mr. Miller, he said, was asked by a council member, when do you think? And he said, hopefully before I retire. And then he said, he came up with a date is they're looking at occupancy on October 2026. Now, we've been around and we've heard.
We've been hearing about the new airport, what, 20 years, 30 years?
At least.
Oh, and by the way, not a new airport terminal, it's a replacement airport. They are very careful to always say that because, once again, the voters said, yes, you can make the new a replacement terminal, but you can't increase the gates and you can't, make it international. It's going to be the same amount of gates, but just in a different location and a little safer. And I understand that they still are trying to keep the two boardings, where you walk out and you walk up the stairs instead of a jetway. It only lets you go in and out of the plane on one door. Where when you can walk to it, there's usually two doors that are open. So people like that a lot better because they can walk, straight to the back of the plane that way if they want to, so they can walk through the entire plane.
Oh, well, I do know that I think they've gotten input that people like that.
I think people like that, yes.
And it's a little retro. But the nice part, hopefully, I talk to people now, you hear the whatever's going on down in LAX, like this weekend. The nice part about Burbank, they're going to try to keep it. You get there, you can get on your plane 20 minutes and fly away. You don't have to drive around in circles and circles for parking. You don't have to, get in through the TSA. It's just all that time consumption.
Well, I hope they're also thinking about flying cars because I don't know if you knew this, but yesterday the FAA approved the first flying car, and there's a company that's going to be making flying cars. It's going to go up and down, and it's going to go straight. It's not like a plane where it has to land on a runway. It's going to be able to go straight up and then fly. But I don't think you're going to see a lot on the road right now because right now the starting price is $300,000.
Well, with these people flying out of the world or into space and dropping a couple $100,000.
Well, that's the truth.
I guess one of them will be driving a George Jetson mobile.
Yep.
We didn't plan on that. We could have had the sound effects from George, but you know what? I'll look at my watch because wasn't that one of the things they did? Look at their watch, and did we ever think we'd have flying cars?
We were told back in the 60s, which you remember and I remember, but in the 60s when we were still probably at Stevenson Elementary School, good old shout out to Stevenson there, that we'd have flying cars by the year 2000. Well, that was 23 years ago.
Yep.
And haven't seen a flying car lately, but at least now the FAA has actually approved the first flying car.
Amazing. That's why I say nobody has a crystal ball. COVID, nobody thought that would shut our country down for a year, or back it up and everything that between that. But, well, flying cars, think about it. Like,
Yeah, the only problem with the cars right now is they only can fly for an hour, and can go 200 miles on the ground. So it's not going to be they're not going to be able to go very far, but at least it's a start. But 100 miles in the air would probably get you past a lot of the freeway around here.
Yeah,
pretty
most
quick.
Definitely. I just can't picture people. It's going to have to all be automated because I can't picture people pushing a button, flying a car.
Well, the thing I'm worried about is what happens when it starts getting some traffic up there, and then all of a sudden, we had traffic accidents with injuries, right? But that's two cars that collide, and people get injured to a point, and what happens when two people collide at 300 feet? There's only one way to go. It's down.
It's down.
And hopefully they're good people, then they'll go up. But that's I think that in itself is going to be a risky thing.
Well, a while back when I heard Amazon was going to start dropping off packages by drones.
Well, they actually are in some places,
right? Where where the house is a mile apart. That's okay. But here in the Civic Center or in a public, like downtown LA, they're going to be like.
Yeah, that's just not that's not happening.
Scary. But
Very.
Moving on from flying cars and monkey stuff.
Well, there's also during the meeting, during the oral communications, I guess our public information officer, Jonathan Jones, his daughter wanted to address the council. And you were very impressed with her. You having a granddaughter, and you understand how their minds work to a point, and how brave that must be to get up in that form. I've addressed the council before. I think you have too. And you get up there, it's a little bit of
Well, I had heard from Jonathan. My granddaughter goes to school with her. They both go to Bret Hart, and
shout out to Bret Hart tonight.
Marlowe is 6 years old. She said, Daddy, I want to address the city council. He didn't, entice her or anything. She went up and she almost couldn't reach the microphone. She pulled it down, and she didn't say many words, but they were powerful words. And she said, if you think good thoughts, good things happen. And I'll tell you, they say
from the mouth of babes.
Out of mouth of babes. I text Jonathan. He had to be so proud of her. And I know our city council was sure proud of her. Good job, Marlowe. And she's taken some acting classes now at 6.
Yeah, but at 6 years old,
right.
To go up in that kind of a forum, with nothing but adults and
Exactly.
everybody staring at you,
How many times will we watch council that people get up and,
oh, yeah.
And then you see yourself on a camera on both sides of the chamber.
Although we did miss Man with a Hat.
Yeah, we
Did
did.
not make an appearance this week, What's happened to Man with a Hat?
But you know what?
Probably Nick Gutierrez. And, of course, who's Nick Gutierrez? The mystery man behind the council district. So they're probably together hanging out somewhere.
Well, I don't know if Jonathan would suggest that she run for council someday, but at 6 years old, if she's that smart and she's that sharp, I think I would vote for her.
Well, people get their, they say acting chops, but people get their, just what they want to do in life based on early experiences. And it sounds like a very positive experience for her. And will give her more confidence. And you never, a little confidence goes a long way when it comes to young people and their goals and ambitions. And, because let's face it, most of us never know until we're, our 20s or 30s, what we want to do in our lives. But it sounds like she's trying to figure things out already before she's 10 years old. She'll kind of say, here's what I want to do and be focused on that journey, which, that's pretty good stuff.
Well, you think about it, these kids nowadays, when we went to Stevenson and Jordan.
Oh, shout out to Jordan. Now,
that's right.
But it was Jordan when we went there. There's nothing wrong with saying that, and now it's Doris Loretta.
We had little shows and so forth, but these kids are now being taught my little granddaughter, 4 years old, just had a dance recital and danced on the stage at Burbank High in front of a sold out audience at 4 years old, and she did it fine. So these kids are, I look at some of these kids in our junior high and our high school that are in the performing arts. They can sing in front of 10,000 people, and they do it without a flaw, So I'm glad our schools are teaching these kids to.
Well, and the parents too who are encouraging them.
Right.
I mean, how easy could Jonathan Jones have said, "No, you're not going to do that." No, we're not going to waste their time with you talking. Instead, he said, "What a great idea." Here's your time. And like I say, now she's on the road to who knows what in her life.
That's right.
And so parents, encourage your kids like that. I mean, it's you just never know. Don't tell them they can't.
Well, you hear people. I've heard people say that they've addressed council, and they'll go to the market, and somebody will say to them, "Oh, I saw you on city council." Can you imagine Marlowe going back to Bret Hart? It's summer right now, so
I don't think many of those kids are watching city council.
I hope not. I hope not. But boy, they got.
I usually watch the YouTube numbers. There's usually about 35 people watching at a time. So
good job, Marlowe. But they also that meeting. It was not a really stacked meeting. That was the one that on the consent agenda they changed the street name. That was one of their 2 street names.
Now, I didn't see they brought that. Did they talk about that at all?
Yeah, they did, because one of the gentlemen for the little access road off of Rogers, he's had trash and debris. And it's funny because he said last week, city came out, or Caltrans, and cleaned it all up. David Krisky gave a report. They had to have it done by July 1st, by the end of the fiscal year. The project is considered done on their part. I saw Caltrans also had put that out. But apparently they have to have water service so they can put some, grass or plants over there. So there's some work being done. The one resident that spoke up, first time he'd ever been to city council, and he says, finally it might be nice once they get done. And I guess they have to, run a water line and so forth. So, and electrical. So if they have to, irrigate. So.
Well, I was still a little concerned about them naming a street after a business, though. And if that business
goes bye-bye.
So we say bye-bye.
So, and then, going on the next day, or that, the PD had put out a press release. And I think you had said to me that you were listening that night. Listen to these calls every night. I hear these.
Yeah, it was around 2:30 in the morning too.
That's late. when the tone alert goes off, and that tone alert means on the police radio, beep, and everybody listens. They're going somewhere.
Yep.
And it's either a business burglary, a domestic violence, or a catalytic converter. And that one, the police department is caught on now. Head for the on-ramps. Well, that's what they did. They headed for the I-5 on Front Street. Sure enough, be bopping along. They had a unit, looking. Here comes the car that the person who lived on the block where it was being cut. Here comes the car. They stopped it.
Man or woman from Los Angeles, not from Burbank.
Well, but yeah,
and that's why they check the freeways, because these crimes are not being committed by Burbank people.
Oh no! If you look at in fact, somebody brought that to my attention last week. We print the police log every week, and somebody said to me, "If you ever look, there's very few Burbank people being arrested that live here. They're all from other parts of Los Angeles County." What got me is when they put out that release. He was like 18 years old, the driver, and the male was in his early 20s, stealing catalytic converters. It's just really...
and I wonder, what do they get for... I mean, okay, precious metals inside them and all that, and I wonder what they sell them for.
$500 to $700, I'm told.
Okay, and who's buying them?
Junkyards, the metal refiners that can,
Well, I think until they pass a law that says... Anytime you see a converter in a junkyard and it's etched with somebody's driver's license number or something on it, then they get arrested on the spot and they get 2 years in jail or something. I think if you started making, I bet you if you don't have anybody to buy them, then people aren't going to start selling them, and they're not going to steal them.
Well, they'll find somewhere to sell them. But if you notice, LA has put a law on their books. If they stop you and you have a catalytic converter in your car,
Etched or not,
and you're going to jail. Your car's getting impounded for a minimum of so many days, and you're going to jail. LA is tired. And in LA, it happens.
And it's funny because my friend actually had his stolen, and he lives in Panorama City. He goes, he called the police, and they said, "What do you want us to do? We're not coming out there. Burbank, it's a field emergency. Panorama City, it's, oh, well, tough luck."
It's a property crime. And police, they've changed their policies on chasing these people on a property crime. As soon as they get on the freeway,
they'll still come to the call.
They'll answer the call,
but not in LA. They won't.
Right, because here in Burbank they take a report.
Right.
And it just these cars that are, I mean, it's 30-second is what one of the police sergeants told me. Two guys, one pumps it up, the other already has a battery up, it sawzall. They cut it off, they leave the car, they're gone.
It's funny. When I was, back in the day, probably 8, 9, 10 years old, my parents, we went down to Tijuana one time. The only time I've ever been to Mexico. And back then, you drove over the border, and you're going down to Tijuana, and there's all these shops on the side of the road selling hubcaps. I go, well, that's kind of strange. And my dad says, yeah, we've got to watch the car when we're down there, and so we got to stay with the car all the time, or else you're going to be buying your hubcaps back as you're leaving on the way home.
That's funny.
It's kind of like catalytic converters nowadays. You're not going to buy your own catalytic converter back from one of these shops.
Well, and that's what gets me. I had to have a couple of catalytic converters on my truck replaced, not because they were stolen, because they went bad. That's a pretty penny. They're $1,500 to $2,000 a piece. And some insurance companies will cover you, but some people have deductibles.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
So that's why if you can get your catalytic converter either etched, engraved, there's a couple of places in town that build cages around them. Burbank PD had hooked up with a couple of mechanics around town that if you went in there, they would engrave your converter.
Yeah, and I guess they're looking mostly for trucks too, because it's easier to get under a truck. They don't have to really jack it up or anything. It's the clearance is a lot better. So yeah, if you have a truck and you have a lot invested into it, might spend some money and put that cage on there.
Well, most of them are Priuses, Toyotas. There's a certain type of car, Hondas, that are more valuable, and they can do it pretty quick. So, but I'm glad Burbank PD they put out a release, and catalytic converters at one time, they were happening 1-2 times a night.
Oh yeah, I haven't heard them as much lately, but they're still out there.
Yep.
So on Thursday, big day for the Burbank Fire Department, and rightly so. We had some fire recruits who became probationary firefighters. We had some promotions. And did you say we had some retirements too? I think, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it was a big day, and they had it at the Starlight Bowl in a great ceremony, and you were there to cover it. So why don't you give us a little rundown on what happened?
Well, it's now that COVID's done, the guys didn't have to wear masks. This class, when it went in, it started with 25. They're now down to 15. They had to deal with 40 days of rain. And how do you teach firemen?
Right. That's right.
They're out there doing push-ups in the rain. They're out there teaching them how to, because if you're going to rescue in the middle of the night and it's raining, you ain't going to ask for the
taco.
Exactly. But it was a Class A event, right? Like Burbank Fire Department, Class 1, Class A. They did a memorial for 3 firemen that have passed away, retired firemen, one being John Cook. John retired. He served from February of 54 to August of 93. I remember John. He was a fireman's fireman. All he wanted to do was go in and put fire out. Darrell Forbes, who was a fire marshal and a battalion chief. He served longtime Burbank resident. He served from July 66 to March 2000. And then George Spenley. That's an old name to some of us, I don't think any of the current firemen would know that name. He was a captain, I remember quite well. Served from 1958 to December of '82, and they played Amazing Grace. They had a moment of silence, and they rang the fireman's bell. And that is the fireman's bell was a way back in the day to signal fire calls. But when you lost somebody, it's called 555. They would ring it 5 times, and they did that. So that was rather nice. And then they also had a couple of guys retire. One of the great battalion chiefs who goes by Mondo, it's Edmondo St. Zaire as a battalion chief. He's retiring, came on in 94, and he's retiring next month. Well, no, this month. It's July already.
We're in July.
So he received his axe from the Burbank Fire Union. That's one of the things they always present. A retiree is an axe with their dates on it and so forth. And Steve Byrne, who was a frequent face over here in this district. He's worked at Station 12 for many years, from September 2001 to July. That was his last day, in fact, was on Thursday. So he's gone. And then John Freeborn. John used to run their March of Dimes and the toy thing for years. That was one of the things. And John was a captain over at Warner Brothers as part of the fire department. He came on in October of '97 and retired last year. So that was pretty nice. But what was really different...
Well, let me ask you this, though, before we move on, is how many of those guys retired? Were you there when they joined the department and shot them as rookies?
Yes. All of them. I'm going on 50 years shooting pictures of Burbank Fire Department. These guys are on 30 years. So I remember all their training classes and, when they were boots.
So you've got their history basically at home in your computer.
And that was the thing, you see these guys retire. Like a couple of firemen that were there, a couple of retirees. Saw Chief Doug Paris there. Mike Davis was there. Dwayne Servillo, Bruce Mentek. The nice thing is these guys still come to retirements, and they love to tell stories. And once you retire, I happen to know Steve Byrne is living in Texas, and a couple of Burbank firemen come from Texas to work their shift, and then they go back to Texas. Well, you won't have to be going back and forth anymore. But, it's not, with 50 new firemen, they have those spots to fill with 15 new guys.
Now, these 15 firemen will start on the department immediately. And
they started as of...
Right, and they'll make sure all the engines now have back to 4 men and everything else. But I wonder how many these 15 are now on a 1-year probationary status. Right. They're not hired and they're fired and that's it. No, they have 1 year to now prove themselves, and after that 1 year, then they become a regular firefighter.
Correct.
But if they don't do the job in 1 year, they still can be let go. So,
or any time in that year.
Yeah, the pressure is still on.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. What they learn in the academy is the basics. Now you have to learn, and it's funny, I remember going to Station 12 one day with my son. I think my son Matt was 10 or 12, and we went around dinner time, and they were done with dinner, and there were 2 recruits that are probationary firefighters. They couldn't watch TV. They couldn't go out and shoot hoops. They took their 3x5 cards, and they had to know by memory where every part, every tool that they use is on the truck and on the engine. So these guys, as part of their probation, you don't get to go play around. It's still school time. And I remember my son was so impressed with that. For years and years, Matt would come home from school and he would do his homework. And he said, I do it right like Burbank firemen. And they have to learn, they have to be able to work a saw or the jaws of life at 3 a.m. with your eyes closed, and stuff like that. And I've been out with them. So it'll be an interesting year for them.
Yeah, they have to know. I went on a ride along with Engine 11 one time, and they had a probationary guy on, and they went to an area, and he had to give a presentation on a part of the truck and how of the engine, actually, not the truck, the engine, and how it worked, and what the purpose was, and demonstrated. And all the firefighters got out and they watched him, and that was done one day. It's kind of a daily thing. Every shift, they've got to make a presentation. And you and I are both watching that county fire show, and they just had their boot, do a presentation on some firefighters that were lost in the line of duty. But it's not only is it they're learning, but it's their appreciation for the job and what it entails.
Oh, definitely. And being around these fire guys, it takes a lot. Especially you get woken up, firemen are a whole different, you got to want to serve. You want to, it's very competitive to become a fireman. They take only the best. And if you think about it, you get awoken 3, 4 in the morning. You not only have to get into your turnouts, into everything within a minute, you have to get on that rig, you get to a fire. And if you got a fully involved house or fire or a car that's overturned on fire, you got to rescue people. And it's not the time to be scratching your head. How do we do this? Or how did we do that? And one of the lines that Chief Davis always reminded me, when you call the fire department, it's not like calling the Maytag man where they can go back to the shop and get this or that to perform their job. They have to figure it out there.
Yes.
So, if you think about that, and we have the best. Burbank, that's why they probably cut 10 people, because Burbank will not lower their standards.
Well, and those 10 people, they were, they were recruited. They went through the paperwork. They went through the physical agility. They went through the orals. They went through everything. They didn't just happen. They thought they were maybe the right stuff. And it over the 16 weeks? So over the 16 weeks, they found out that they just couldn't cut it in some areas.
Exactly.
So, I mean, yeah, it's demanding. But you know what? Those are the people who put their lives in line every day for us without thinking twice about it.
Oh, definitely. And the same thing with police. When they send a new officer to the Sheriff's Academy or to Rio Hondo, they learn a lot. But when they come back, then they're with a field training officer to be on the street. Being on the street is totally different than being in the academy where it's sterile. They might teach you how to have, use your big boy voice, how to do arrest techniques and all that. But when you're in a house of a domestic violence call, you have to make thoughts very quick. And that's where their field training.
It's all about the training.
And Burbank has cut some people I know that had gone through the academy, but you know what? They didn't make it on the streets in Burbank. And Burbank, again, like I say, won't lower. Now, I just read a report. Other agencies are lowering their standards a little so they can get the numbers in. Burbank won't do that.
And they shouldn't. You know what? And that's why I'm glad the city council stepped up to pay them good money, because those standards should be in place, and it should be hard to be a firefighter in Burbank. You're going to be paid well for it, so you better be able to do the job.
Yep. So these guys, a lot of things they can't do. So that was, we talk about the recruits. They also have some new hires. The fire department, everybody sees the fire engine, a fire truck, the firemen in their nice uniforms out there, and those are the guys you see on the street. But there's people that work in the office, in the prevention office, like a new mechanic, Lon Nguyen. He keeps Burbank. People don't realize those fire trucks have to operate all the time. Very seldom you hear engine so-and-so, we have a dead battery, or we can't go somewhere. So they have top-notch people. We have our own mechanics at the fire department.
And if it breaks down 3 a.m, guess who gets called at 3 a.m?
Oh, definitely.
They don't say the next day, well, when you come in tomorrow. No. They say, you're coming in right now to get this problem solved.
And they have. And that's, so they hired a couple of new inspectors. We met, one of the clerks, our fire inspector on one of our previous podcasts, Karina Wakefield. So this was
very impressed with her, by the way. She was very impressed.
All the new hires are really sharp. And they got to be introduced and were there. The other thing, Burbank just had some guys come out of paramedic school. And you talk about, besides learning all your fire stuff, you have to be on the department for several years before you could apply to go to paramedic school. And I believe we have 5 new paramedics. And again, you and I listen to calls.
What a thankless job.
Oh.
I mean,
Get up at 4 a.m. to go grab somebody out of bed.
Get up at 4 a.m? I don't think they go to sleep. I think they're basically going all night long at times. There's only 3 paramedic units in the city, and how many times are all 3 going at the same time?
Yep.
And all of a sudden, all 3 are out, and they say, any paramedic unit available, please let us know, on dispatch. And well, there and I mean, those guys are going all night long.
Oh, definitely. One of the nice things Burbank has, when you're a paramedic, how they rotate. You're on what they call the RA, but also at that station house, they rotate so you're not on the RA for weeks and weeks on end.
You go to the engine.
You go to the engine, so you can get a night's sleep sometimes, and so forth. So they rotate. But
the 3 paramedic stations, for people to know, is 13, which is up on Thornton, 15, which is at Verdugo and Beechwood, and of course 11, which is the main fire station. Those are the 3 paramedic stations,
which we call the big house. That's a task force station. It is considered, everything's there almost. But we also had some new hazmat techs. It's just amazing. These guys all go through an application process, besides doing their fireman stuff, that they want to be involved in as a tech, as a hazmat technician. So we have 4 new hazmat techs, and
our hazmat unit is called Hazmat 12 and runs out of Station 12, which is on Hollywood Way.
Yep, which is state. They can be called anywhere in the state. They meet the state requirements. If they are needed somewhere, they can go out of state. And we talked to these guys on a podcast at Fire Service Day. You think about the extra education. You mix these 2 chemicals together, you got to know what that cloud's going to be. Yeah. And they all know this.
Well, his education was tremendous, but I was also impressed with his passion. I mean, it's not just a job to him. It's something, that he's really involved with, and it's important to him, you know, and that's great. I mean, these guys live it. They don't just do it.
But you think of, I read on the news today where they had a hazmat incident at the White House.
Oh, really?
Yeah, today. And they closed off tons of area, and they called in there at the White House. They have their own hazmat, but they called in the DC. These guys are all, they all know the same thing. They found out what it was. It was a mixture of some things that wasn't, how do I want to say it, explosive, but they found out I believe it was a form of something. I don't know the technical terms.
Okay, well, it wasn't a Baby Ruth bar left in the pool, was it?
No. So, moving on, they also promoted, let's see, a fire inspector to fire inspector 2, a new fire engineer. Now, what does an engineer do, Craig?
Engineer drives either the engine or the truck, and runs the truck or the engine at the scene.
And they are literally back east, they call them chauffeurs. Out here, they are engineers. But that guy, again, most people go, well, what's it take to drive a truck? They're all automated. No, you have to know when you have 5 hose lines coming off your rig, and guys are dependent on water at the end of those hoses. They have to know friction loss and water power and pressure and so forth. So when you shut down one hose, the next one doesn't knock a fireman off. So there's quite a bit. And
even when they drive an engine, they have to know the rules of going, what we call Code 3, lights and sirens, where to pass cars at, how to go through intersections.
And again, think about it, waking up at
3 a.m.
3 a.m., you have to know where Gaylord is or where Collagen Court is and how to get there the quickest. Those engineers in their brain.
You know where Estrella Way is, right?
I do now.
Oh, now we do.
We do. In whose district?
That's B13's.
There you go. So we have Andrew Whitehead, who was promoted to fire engineer. Paul Conzen, who was promoted to a captain. Paul's been on the fire department for many years. A local boy that has now made it up to the captain status. Omid Kirisani is also a new fire captain. And we have one new battalion chief because we said goodbye to the one retiring as of today or yesterday. So we have a new Battalion Chief Pete Garcia, who is a great guy. And then they went on for Fireman of the Year. And I'll tell you, Garrett Miller was Burbank Firefighters, and we're going to do we might even do a separate podcast with him because his love of the job, his love of the community of Burbank. He is a paramedic, and I happen to know him when my mother lived a block away from Station 15. She lived with one of those life alerts. I've fallen and I can't get up. And it would automatically call the dispatch. And when they got there, they would call me when she would tell them who she is. And Garrett many times had me on the phone. Your mom doesn't have to go to the hospital. She's okay. She fell going to the bathroom or something. They put her back into bed. My mom passed away. Tomorrow is actually would have been her 101 birthday. But Garrett was elected by all his fellow firefighters and well-deserved as Burbank Firefighter of the Year.
That's fantastic.
And then we had class graduation, so
right.
And, we're working on a video.
We're working on it. It's going to be a little bit, but we're trying to do something nice, and we even had the use of the myBurbank drone for this one. So we'll.
That's right.
Got a couple drone shots even.
We have a drone out there. We had retired Chief Davis, and the Burbank Fire Department really put on a Class 1 show.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little about putting their training into action here. Thursday also afterward.
Thursday was a busy day.
Probably around 1:00. First, there was a scare of an explosive device at a house on Maple. And, when they got there, they found out that, they found a box and they wasn't sure what was in it. It could be dynamite.
Well, how they got the call, it started about noon, 12:30. A gentleman in the 1800 block of Maple apparently had passed away. A brother or relative came out to clean out the garage and clear out the trash and get the house ready to sell or whatever. And his brother used to be a miner, do a little gold mining.
We all used to be miners. Oh, wait, not that kind of miner. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. Gold mining here in California.
I got you.
Well, he did some gold mining. Well, they found this box that kind of, one of these military bullet, type boxes.
Something old and...
Right. And he opened it up, and the things were decayed, and they were round looking like sticks of dynamite.
Yeah.
So he moved them. They moved them into the backyard.
He used to be a miner and used explosives. 2 and 2 would make 4 immediately on that.
Yeah. Literally. Well, he backed off. Called Burbank PD. Burbank PD. They learned many years ago with Gabe Alvarez. They had a call here that he went up and touched the bag and it blew his hand off. And Gabe had to retire after that. And I knew Gabe quite well.
That was 25 years ago.
Oh, yeah. That was at the trailer park on Hollywood Way. They learned, and they don't do what LAPD does. They call Burbank is in the part of LA County. So they call the LA County Sheriff's Bomb Squad. That is a committed detail. That's all they do. These guys, they rolled out here, and, they evacuated neighbors. Now, some of them they called. They knew the numbers to call exact neighbors. In fact, I talked to the one neighbor that lived right next door. We used one of his pictures in myBurbank many years ago. So he came talking to me, but he said they got a call, that as a precaution, we want to move you out. And he moved down the street. They closed off Maple at Jeffries and Victory. Sheriff's guys came in before they even do anything. They called in the gas company to find out what gas lines are running. They called in the power department to find out where power, because before anything crazy goes on, they wanted to look at.
If that's 10 sticks of dynamite in there, that's going to create a inconvenience
for many people, and talking to one of the firefighters, one of our chiefs, apparently one of the methods for them to figure out what it was, first they went in, they have a robot which they could go in, but they looked at it from a safe distance with binoculars and so forth, and they kind of I guess if it was dynamite, they could dilute it to the point where it's safe using diesel oil. So they went in with a Hudson sprayer, started spraying it. Again, they had paramedics standing by. They had an engine company standing by. How the sheriff's guys deal with this, they know real well. And I just saw yesterday, it's been 2 years since LA blew up all that fireworks. And people thought, well, was it fireworks, whatever? You don't know.
And some of those people who didn't take the right precautions are getting some time in the shade.
Well, that they are. They kind of goofed that up. But we fall under LA County. They went in there, and I was told, like I said, the method, they kind of used some diesel oil, and they were able to wet it enough to where they could see plastic caps on it and determine they were road flares. They look exactly the same. You can't tell the difference. And if these pros don't know, so to get rid of it, what they would do is they diluted it with diesel oil. They would probably dig a hole in the backyard, and it's not explosive then. They could burn it off, and then they can just dispose of what's left. And that's when they let the residents go back in.
Okay. Well, so while that was just wrapping up, we also had a small fire over on Lima Street, where I guess the barbecue got out of control.
Well, no,
it
was a weird fire. It went out as a barbecue, but they had no propane. It was a barbecue island in a backyard that it was not in use. It had no electrical to it. It caught fire and put up a heck of a loom up. They rolled a full assignment, 3 engines.
Was it a boomer?
It was a boomer.
A boomer.
If you're watching that county show, you'll hear that term.
Boomer.
They used to call it something else that you can't say these days.
Nope.
But they had smoke visible. They'd laid lines, came off the hydrant. 3 engines, 2 truck companies, the chief, that's a structure response. They put it out in seconds. I think it was 10 minutes maximum. A lot of hose to pick up. But then they had to call in an investigator. Because if you think about it, propane tank is empty. No electrical going to that island.
Clean out your barbecues, people.
And they,
clean out your barbecues occasionally.
The old line that arson investigators always use, rats don't start fires with matches. So they had to determine, and we haven't found out what the conclusion was on the cause of that fire. So,
well, and of course Friday we had what it could have been. It wasn't, but what it could have been, a huge fire that might have rivaled the ranch fire, 30 years ago. But it was, there was an explosion. In fact, we had a power flicker here, and I go, well, that's kind of weird, and of course, the first thing I do is start listening to the radio, saying, oh, what's going on? And 3-4 minutes go by, and I'm not hearing anything. Then suddenly we hear the full. We hear engine 12 dispatch. I think truck 12 was already on the lot.
They were for an elevator
and
rescue.
Right. And then engine, of course, that happened because of the power surge, which we didn't at the time know about. But engine 12 did start rolling, for a possible fire at the studio. In they said building 23 or 35.
33.
Okay.
Building 33. I happen to know.
And why is that? Why do you happen to know what that building is?
Well, I used to be a fireman for the Burbank studios back 30 some odd years ago. And I was at that. That was my station.
We had some good times there. We stopped by, and I remember jumping on the back of and you had an actual engine back then.
Engines, yep.
And back then you jumped on the back of an engine, and you went to a call, and you drove around, and I'm bouncing up and down the back of that thing, and
those were the old days.
Those are fun days. But anyhow,
the firehouse is on the main boulevard. If you drive past Warner Brothers, you look up gate 2 where the gate is on Olive. That is the main drag. That's where the firehouse is stationed. Now, I looked at some aerial pictures. The powerhouse used to be next to it, and then there was transformers in a fenced area where the fire chief used to park their cars. Well, they moved that all those transformers. They put them in a concrete, kind of a building without a roof on it to protect if it ever blows up, it doesn't blow out and hurt people.
And guess what? It blew up.
It blew up.
It was an explosion. And engine 12 immediately saw smoke. And engine,
So did everybody else
engine
in Burbank.
13 on the other side of the city saw smoke. So they're rolling and, of course, started a second alarm assignment right away.
A second alarm assignment, meaning the first group of fire equipment is there and you see that much smoke, you're going to need backup in 20 minutes. So you start heading your second alarm, and that got them Glendale, Pasadena. I mean, our mutual aid system.
And who wasn't going to the fire, then those cities also came and manned our fire stations while our units were out.
So what that little transformer, most people think the studio doesn't own that. It's a Burbank Water and Power substation. That's how the studio gets their power. They don't generate their own. So that transformer was actually a Burbank City transformer that blew up. My son, who happens to work on the lot quite a bit, there's nothing shooting right now. So it didn't take anybody out of production, but the studio didn't have a transformer. So people in offices were let to go home. You know, I read a little of everything. It was not a suspicious fire. It was, they'll find out the cause. It was faulty something.
Yeah, because
Transformer's $1 million.
Nobody's going to be in there. You know, that's not. Yeah, I'm not even.
So the studio, if you drove by even a day later, the studio was pretty dark in some of the locations. But the water, Dawn, the Water and Power general manager, put out a press release and a statement that they were on scene. In fact, we had a picture. Our announcer, Craig Durling, was walking by, and truck after truck of Burbank Water and Power went in. They worked on it all night long. They worked on it the next day. Probably still working on it because it's a holiday weekend.
Yep.
And to get them back in service. So, yeah, that was kind of a...
So that was... I actually saw, ABC national news. It's saying, oh, that's down the street there. That's that right here in old Burbank, but it was a national story.
It was a national story, but, I saw so many things that people pick up, big fire, Warner Brothers, because everybody saw the column of smoke. Transformers burn oil. They got oil to keep them cool. Oil burns black, right like an auto fire. It burns pretty black. And that's what people saw. And it first went out as a structure fire because they didn't know until they got on scene. So the way you put that fire out is you cool it down with lots of water. And if you take away that fire triangle, you take one of those things away, like I said, being...
And I think it was out in about 30 minutes, and they mopped up and got out of there.
Literally.
Well, Friday was also a big day for Romancing the Bean, who celebrated 30 years of business in Burbank. And you stopped by there and checked it out a little bit?
Well, I did. Carrie Kroll, who is the owner of Romancing the Bean, did you know what Friday was? How about June 30th?
Nice day.
30 years. That's
Okay.
why she did it all on Friday the 30th.
Okay. Was that the day she started?
Yes.
Oh, on the 30th.
On the
Okay.
30th. She, Romancing the Bean has been a couple of places around town. You could read the story on myburbank.com. Carrie Kroll started at a little tiny coffee shop across from Warner Brothers. And she would work at Timmy Nolan's. A lot of us know Timmy Nolan's on Riverside at night. And she lived in a little tiny apartment. She moved from there up to San Fernando Road. She's been on Magnolia Park. She had a real nice ceremony. The chamber was out there. Majority of the city council members were out there. She had a string quartet playing. She gave away coffee mugs, baseball hats, and cracked the champagne.
Well, good for her, and we'll see her for another 30 years. So
Hope so.
Very successful business in Burbank, and everybody does now know where she is. So it's very nice. Okay, we'll be back in a second with the week that will be.
How would you like your business advertised in this very spot? My Burbank Talks is looking for businesses interested in a 30-second spot to appear in our podcasts. If you're interested, please email advertising@myburbank.com and we'll be glad to discuss all of the exciting opportunities with you. Now, back to our podcast.
And we're back with the week that will be.
The week that will be, does that mean like this week?
That means this week as of today. So basically, let's see here.
Not a lot going on because of July 4th.
Not a lot. There was a landlord-tenant commission meeting tonight.
Did you go?
Well, I didn't go, and guess what? I never know what happened because they don't record them. But I do know there was a lot on their agenda, and the problem is I don't know what they can do about it. They can just listen to people and try to ask the other side, can you please get along? And if they say no, they'll say, oh, well, we tried. And that doesn't do people a lot of good, but sorry to hear about that. And then, well, you know what tomorrow is?
Tomorrow is a parade on. Oh no parade.
No, not in Burbank. We don't do parades anymore.
That's right.
We don't do events here in the city anymore.
But it is the opening of the Starlight Bowl and the big fireworks show in uptown Burbank.
Absolutely. So get in your cars and drive up on the hill and find a spot and park. And
people have asked. I've seen people ask. People are new to Burbank. Where's the best place to go? Well, years ago, the city used to put on a festival, July 4th.
JC's.
The JC's did it up at McCambridge Park.
It was huge.
They would close down Amherst, and they would bring all the city equipment out, and it would be, in fact, at one time, a parade came down 3rd Street into the park. I remember that. I have a picture of me doing communications back then.
It was a place to go.
It was.
It was a place to go. Every year you knew to go to McCambridge Park. You went and you did the carnival, and at 9 o'clock they'd shut it down, and you'd go on the grass and watch the fireworks, and that was part of our community back then, which now they've, it's another event in our city we just don't do anymore.
Yeah.
It's amazing how little this city of 100,000 people does. No parades, the only thing we really do as a community now is basically holiday in the park.
City council meetings.
Yeah, or holiday in the park. That's it. We don't really, and even that's more of a valley thing than a hill thing, and it's too bad. We need to have more events in the city, and I think the city needs to work with people a little more to make these events happen instead of putting so many obstacles in their way.
Well, if you're thinking, if you're listening to this show on July 4th while you're out mowing your lawn or getting your barbecue ready, people wonder where you could see the Burbank fireworks show. If you're new to Burbank, a lot of people go to McCambridge Park. A lot of people go to the football field at Burbank High. People go to the parking structure across from the old IKEA. Some people will go to the LA County Courthouse parking structure. There are a lot of parking structures around town. The show is visible. I remember, July 4th was my mom's birthday, so we had a yard party every year. I remember climbing on the roof down here on Toluca Park Drive before Warner Brothers put up some studios, and I could watch the fireworks show from out here in the valley. So you could see it everywhere. If you have tickets, go to the bowl. If not, those streets get so filled up there.
Yeah, it's a zoo after 9:20. It becomes a zoo up there.
Oh yeah, I've many times tried to get out of that lot, and now that I live up there.
Now, on the other hand, down here in the media district, I actually watch the Lakeside fireworks every year.
Well, a lot of people,
sit out in the backyard, and there it is, and it's another night, 20-minute show. You don't see the things that launch from the ground, but you see everything in the air, and it's a great show every year, and we appreciate Lakeside putting it on for our benefits.
Well, last night there was a drone show over at Hanson Dam. They stopped doing aerial fireworks, and the environmental people are really against fireworks because of the smoke, and that gets into the lungs. Usually all the illegal fireworks that people blow off in Sun Valley and other cities, our air quality will be the worst on Wednesday. It always is.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of cities are canceling their shows and going to drone shows. And I kind of wonder, will Burbank ever do that? You can't fly drones close to the airport. You can't fly them over people. So I don't know if they'd ever do a drone show up there. And they have prepared the hillside. People don't understand where they fire them off is the old dump road right below Stow Park.
I watched that one year, and it's they have them, all the tubes are loaded, and it's all computerized.
Oh,
And when it's
no.
time to start, they push one button that starts it, and it actually has a speaker that says, "and 1, and 2," and also and 224, and 225, and every time it says it, there's one going off, and so it's all programmed. It's programmed to music and everything else. So it's a great.
Well, I've always
It's interesting.
Years ago they used to fire them off. They would have a fusee come out of the item that they buried in the ground,
The mortar, yeah,
the mortar, and a guy
with a flare.
would take a road flare and light that fusee and turn. And I remember shooting pictures of them firing them off. And then you had to, they'd go up a couple 100 feet, blow up, blah,
Right.
blah, blah.
That's something I never knew until I actually saw that too. And the advantage is we've always had being in the news media. We could do things and go places and see things other people can't. So when you watch them load those and put those in, the fireworks are in a round ball.
Right.
It's not it doesn't look like a missile or anything else. It's a round ball in paper. So when they shoot that in the air, when you see that little trail going up, that's the paper burning around the firework. That's not anything else but just paper burning off it, which is very, very unusual.
And Burbank shows 20 minutes. I once sat on the City of Burbank's July 4th committee, and they hired a company that, I know what they pay for that show. It's pretty expensive for a 20-minute show. But that whole hillside has been watered down.
And you're literally burning your money up in that show.
Yeah, pretty much. And they do it for the people up in the bowl. They have they'll have a band tomorrow and do patriotic songs.
Yeah, well, it pays for itself.
It does. What's kind of neat, people always say, well, they see a helicopter up there and they get worried that, there was a brush fire. They have been watering that ground up there. It's recycled water. That's one thing the city did do. They brought water up to that dump field, and they've been watering it for a week. So it's pretty moist. And they'll have firefighters up there. Most people don't understand firefighter. The Fire Prevention Bureau has an arson investigator that is assigned to work with the crew. So make sure all those round balls get put in when they're supposed to. Before they release anybody up in the bowl to leave, they will they'll go through and watch and make sure everything got fired off. And then LA City as a trade, and how it works is we go to calls at the Equestrian Center and assist them in Cabrini, and it's literally written into the contract, the agreement between Burbank and LA, that LA City will provide a helicopter or two, and they're on standby.
On standby, and up at the helipad, which
Mesa,
they call
that's called
Mesa,
Charlotte
which they
Mesa.
call 16 Alpha.
Well, that's in fire terms, 16 Alpha, but
Right.
to the public, the property. And many years ago, Burbank concreted and cemented the ground up there with huge rocks so these helicopters can land, and they brought water supply up there. So if they have to, they can refill there. It's lit for them. They'll be on standby. They'll wait till, almost every year they have to go off to a fire.
Oh, yeah.
They'll get out of here pretty quick.
We saw them practicing the other night. We watched them on our flight program.
Right.
Up there circling around a little bit, and then they landed for a second and checked it out. So, they're ready to go.
Yep. So that'll be tomorrow night. Enjoy July 4th. And don't forget,
Fireworks are illegal in Burbank.
that is correct. They have,
Safe and sane fireworks are illegal in Burbank.
St. Joe's.
If you can light it, it's illegal in Burbank.
Well, I remember several years ago, a Burbank youth thought he'd make his own fireworks, and he took a little piece of pipe and he put match heads in and some black powder. And he didn't realize when he went to screw the cap on it, that friction was going to blow up. Literally blew his hand right off. And it's unfortunate. Fireworks, even those sparklers,
Yeah.
they go at 33,000 degrees. How many kids think, it's out, and touch it and will burn their hands? So,
Yeah. Not a good thing. Well, have a good 4th of July, and to your older people, have a 5th and the 4th.
5th on the 4th. And,
5th and the 4th.
for these people that have their dogs, I've read a lot of precautions on, online. Get your dog in, keep them in the house, try to either turn some music on because this, and also people that have served, that have PTSD. It's not a great day on July
No.
4th.
No, and it's tough for these people. We
Well, make
understand.
sure if your dog is in your yard, and preferably in your house, but if your dog is not a house dog, make sure your gates are secured. Make sure your dogs have tags on them.
More dogs run away on July 4th than any other day of the year.
Yep.
So, okay, well let's move on. On Wednesday, the Civil Service Board is going to meet in the council chambers. There's actually, if you go to the website and look at their report, they'll talk about every job opening in Burbank, how many people have applied during the months of May and June, how many interviews have been set up, how many people have qualified. So it's actually a very extensive report they're going to get. Thursday, the Board of Building and Fire Code Appeals. Now, I haven't seen them meet in a while. They'll be at 3 p.m. in the City Council chambers, and they're going to get an update on the major projects going on in the city, which are coming up, because they all have to be basically approved by the fire department, for fire safety and people safety, and exiting the building and how many people can be in the building and things like that. They're also going to get an update on the fire department too. So, and the water and power meeting has been canceled on Thursday.
Wow. Even now it's a holiday week. There's a lot going on in our city.
There's a lot going on. And the rest of the week is kind of open after that. But I'm sure that everybody's taking their summer vacations right now and enjoying the nice weather. I heard it was the first time that the city of LA has gone over 80 degrees in 71 days yesterday. 71 days. And you're talking about March, April, May, and June, and not once over 80
Well,
degrees.
that June gloom really, the low fog and clouds.
It was gloomy.
It was gloomy.
It was gloomy, but at least our power bills, not a lot of air conditioning being used.
Oh, you know what? You just said it. As of July 1st, Burbank's new power rates
They go up.
went up. And also, you're going to water your lawns. The water rates are going up. Your air conditioners are going to go on because it's hotter. And people don't realize the rates are going up and be kind of expected.
You can only water your lawn 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Saturdays. That's it. They say, well, how do they know? Well, guess what? Those meters they have that are electronic, when all of a sudden a lot of water is being used on your property at a certain time, let's say Wednesday at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., they'll say, somebody's got their sprinklers going on right now. It's a very long shower.
Yep.
So, okay. I think we've got it for another week.
Well, like we say, take a look at myburbank.com. You can see this on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Call Your Grandma, and every other social media service. And the week that was.
Okay. We will see you all next week.
My Burbank Talks would like to thank all of My Burbank's advertisers for their continued support. Burbank Water and Power, Cusimano Real Estate Group, Providence St. Joseph Medical Center, Burbank Chamber of Commerce, UME Credit Union, Tequila's Cantina and Grill, UCLA Health, Gain Credit Union, Community Chevrolet, Media City Credit Union, Eric Garcia of Farmers Insurance, Providence High School, UPS Store on 3rd Street, and Hill Street Cafe.